Well, hello everyone and welcome back to Adrian's Digital Basement. On today's video, well, you can kind of tell from this pile of boxes, it's the midweek mini mail call. Last week wasn't so mini, and a lot of people pointed that out. This week, maybe I'll keep the time down a little bit. Depends on if there's a bunch of candy in these boxes or not. All right, let's get right to it. All right, so the first package is from T. Maloney in Wichita, Kansas. Hi to all my Kansas viewers. All three of these boxes I received May 14th. So they're all from the same time period. I do have some more packages on the floor over here that have since arrived more recently, but we're gonna do all the ones from the 14th today. I have my Mexican Tang. This one is peach flavor, and it's great for me because it's sugar-free, and it tastes quite good as well. It's not carbonated or anything. It's a powder. You mix it with water. I keep it in the fridge. I usually make up a few different ones at a time. I think I have strawberry, peach, and mango currently in the fridge, and it makes for a cool, refreshing drink with no calories. It also tastes nothing like the orange Tang, which is commonly available in the US and Canada. That just tastes like super fake orange flavor. This actually tastes like the real thing. If you've ever had agua fresca, which is a fresh fruit juice they make in Mexico, this is a lot closer to that. Of course, this doesn't taste as good as real peach juice would, but it's not bad approximation considering it's sugar-free. Anyways, okay, back onto this package. There's a note, but I'm just gonna put that aside and we're gonna dig in to see what's in this box, so it's a little bit of a surprise. All right, so it looks like part of a Commodore 64 bread bin top. Oh, and a couple books. We have Sam's Computer Facts. There's one here for the 128D. The Sam's Computer Facts are fantastic. These are third-party schematics and service manuals for a lot of 80s computers. They also had them for TVs and radios and pretty much anything electronics. And there is also one here for the Commodore 64 bread bin. So we'll take a closer look at those in a second. Let's cut open the 64. All right, let's take a look at this bread bin. Uh-oh. There is a little snapped off piece of the bread bin here. Now, one thing about bread bin tops is they are so fragile. And even though there was a lot of packing material on this one, it looks like it may not have survived. I'm not positive if this was broken initially, but I have found that it's pretty easy to break these bread bin tops. I think I had a 64 once that was maybe sitting under another 64, and it put a big crack right in this top case. So that's really unfortunate because the rest of this case is basically immaculate. No holes, no marks, no nothing. Has the very nice badges on here. Does have broken clips on the back, but that's fixable if you remember one of my previous mail calls. But this is a shame. You can of course glue this back together, but it will forever have a seam where you glued it. You'll be able to see it. And of course, because it's right on the top, it will be obvious when you're looking at the computer. There's also something else in here, a little anti-static bag. Let's take a look at this. Bunch of chips, lots of large and small dips. That's very cool. Let's take a look at the note now. The note's dated the 6th of May, 2020. Adrian, I've enclosed the computer facts that I contacted you about. My scanner broke, so with COVID-19, it took a while to figure out that Office Depot could do it. I had a bread bin top case, not the best shape, but I hope you can use it. Also, a C64 computer facts. I found a bunch of chips that came out of, I think, an Apple IIe, so that's probably these. Some of them have bent legs that I have left that way to reduce the chance of breakage. All right, so let's take a look at this stuff on the bench. Well, here is the Commodore 64 bread bin top with the broken part. Now, this is really unfortunate, like I had mentioned, because this bread bin is in really nice shape otherwise. I mean, look at this thing. It's very clean, doesn't look very yellowed, so the plastic brown color is pretty nice. And other than this broken clip right here, oh, actually, all the clips are broken. Now, if you regularly watch my channel, you'll know that I always struggle with what type of glue to use on different types of plastic. So if you can let me know, as in the viewers, what kind of plastic this case is, so I can use the correct appropriate glue to fix this thing, also to put on the hinge replacements. So yeah, I'd love to know, because I always seem to screw it up. So I'd appreciate the feedback. And in the box, there were a bunch of bags of ICs. Let's dump these out. Take a look at what these are. All right, we got 3 nice piles of ICs here. Why don't I move these 2 piles off to the side, and let's zoom in on this pile here and see what we're dealing with. All right, I've mostly sorted out these chips. Let's start on the right here. So these are 74 LS Logic chips, just a little bit of an assortment of them. These 3 chips here are TBP28L22s, some kind of TI programmable chip. I'm not exactly sure what these are. Finding information on the web was not super easy. This here is a Hitachi 2114 static SRAM chip, which is useful because this is used on quite a lot of machines for video memory usually, or things like that, color RAM on the C64. All of these ICs here are 4116. These are all MOSTECs. Here are some Motorola's. A couple of these are Tandy part numbers. Oh, here's an Apple MOSTEC branded one, a couple more Tandys. And then we have 4 more National Semiconductors, although this one is 400 nanoseconds. Actually, all of these are 400 nanoseconds, but they're also 4016 compatible. These ICs here are 555 timers, and these are derivatives, 556, 556, 556, and I think this one's a 558. Then all of these ICs right here are more 4116 compatible. These are all NECs, 200 and 300 nanosecond parts. I think they're -2s and -3s, if that's what that means. And then over here we have a 54LS00 from Texas Instruments. And these 2 ICs here are CD4013BEs from RCA. And there were a couple other random ICs which I couldn't immediately identify. MC14069Us. We have 2 of those. We have a Gold Star 4017, which might be the same thing as like a CD4017. We have a relatively large package Motorola chip. Not sure what that is. Here's a PAL chip. I don't know what that is. Something from General Instruments here. It says 8720. Oh, it could be the date actually. So up here, ER59256. So maybe this is an I2C flash chip or something like that. And then finally, there were these 4 ICs here, which are basically impossible to tell what they are. The markings are very much worn off. All right, the next batch of chips here. So I'm gonna have to sort through these. Probably gonna be some more RAM chips and things like that. So let me get to it. All right, I've sorted this out. Now this is a cornucopia. So pretty much all of the ICs that were in this bag were 74 LS Logic chips. So all of these dips here are, including these here. And I did find, I think, 3 2114 SRAM chips, 1 4116 RAM chip. So I can put that with this other selection of RAM chips from that first batch. In fact, this is a MOSTEC one, so I'll stick that there. And I'll put the SRAM chips together. So far that's 4 SRAM chips. And this little Motorola IC here, I'm not sure what this is, 741CP. So I'm gonna put this with the random stuff over here. But what's really cool about these ICs is they're clearly old. Like these were pulled out of old machines. Most of the date codes are from the early 80s, 83, 81, 82. But this one right here, this AMD chip here, 7417, 1976, 24th week. I was only about 1 year old when this was manufactured. Now, it's entirely possible that at least one of these ICs is bad, but I've found that old stuff like this, the old stock, is almost always good. Even though this was all dumped in a bag and who knows how it's been stored, it doesn't seem to really matter. And having these ICs on hand is really useful for me because I just never know when I'm going to need a random 74LS logic chip to fix a machine. So this collection of chips will be integrated into my stock of 74LS logic used for repairs. And then that leads us to the final batch of chips. And here they are. These are all larger ICs. Let me sort through these. All right, I've completed sorting out all of these ICs and I've looked up what all of them are. So you'll notice at the top here, we have a large number of these Ferranti ULA chips. Now, a lot of people might be familiar with the Ferranti ULA chip that is in the Sinclair ZX Spectrum, I think the Timex Sinclair 1000, and some other 8-bit computers of that era. Ferranti was an Italian company and they made these special ICs which could replace a large number of logic circuits with a single IC. Now, there's a lot of these ULAs, and it would be neat if these were rare and something that people could use. And I did some searching to figure out what these chips are, and it seems like it's not particularly useful. I found one single thread on VC Fed talking about these chips, and it appears to be from a Tandon TM-62-2L floppy disk drive. And there's the disk drive with the ULA chip installed. Now, this particular person apparently had a problem with his disk drive, and I think it was an issue with the ULA chip, but this post is kind of old. There you see the Tandon part number, model number, whatnot. Now, this post was from 2019, so if this user happens to be watching this and he still would like a replacement ULA for his disk drive, let me know. I have a ton. Now let's move on to these ICs. Starting right here, we have a Texas Instruments TMS 9918ANL chip. So a quick Google resulted in the fact that this is the video display controller chip from the TI-99. Now, unfortunately, this one has a missing pin right here. Now, it's not to say this couldn't be fixed. I could take a pin off something else and then solder it right onto here and hopefully get this working. But this is a useful chip. I think in the TI-99, this chip does fail. And I actually have a spare TI-99 motherboard that appears dead, and I think people definitely said that this chip is probably the culprit. We have a 6502 processor from 1983. We have a Z80 processor, Z80A processor made by Sharp. And finally, this bottom chip is an LSC 81001P. And doing a little searching, this appears to be from a Coco 3. And it didn't tell me what the name of the chip was, but it had a little picture showing the functionality. And it looked like a peripheral interface chip, like a PIA or a CIA type chip. So if you know if these particular chips are problematic and fail, let me know. That's kind of cool to have a spare, I guess. I do actually have a Coco 3, and I have never showed it on the channel, but I hope to show that in the near future. And this chip here is a Hitachi HD 4650 5SP, which as far as I can tell is very similar to a 6845 CRT controller chip. So this is used in all sorts of things. These are still available and manufactured today, but it's nice to have a new old stock version of that. Here we have two Motorola MC146818-P, I'm sorry, no dash B, just P. Now, if my memory is right, these are commonly used in PC motherboards as the real-time clock. Now, I think the Dallas Semiconductor real-time clocks that have a built-in battery are pin compatible with both of these, although, of course, these require external power because there's no built-in battery. But it's cool nonetheless to have these because sometimes these chips do get bad, especially from the battery damage from the leaky batteries, and I have had to replace these before. And we have one MOS chip here, and this is from a Commodore 128D. It's the firmware for the 1571 internal disk drive. Not sure if it's compatible with the external 1571s, but hey, it's kind of cool to have that. And finally, we have several EEPROMs, and we have one mask ROM chip. So this is a 2732 mask ROM from 1982. Who knows what's on there, but I can definitely read this out. And then here we have an assortment of 2716s and 2732 EEPROM chips. Now, I suppose I could try to read these out and see what's on them, but it'd probably be impossible for me to tell anyways, reading them on a PC. But the note did say that some of these chips were probably from an Apple II, so these might be some Apple II ROMs or something like that. Oh, and that brings me to one more chip. There's this one right here. This is an Apple branded chip. Now, I put this label on here because it was very hard to read, and I did some Googling to search to try to figure out the exact part number. But it's 341-0128A, and this is a PROM chip, programmable ROM. It's kind of like the earlier version of EEPROMs in a way, and Apple used these a lot in the early days. This had 1981 date code, and this is the P6A PROM chip from, as far as I understand, the Apple 16-sector floppy disk controller used like in the Apple II Plus, 2E, stuff like that, the Disk 2 controller card. It used a couple of these PROM chips, and if these do go bad, these are very difficult to program these days. I mean, you have to find a vintage programmer that can actually write this code. I don't even know if this code is available on the internet to download and then program. So definitely this is worth keeping, and that's why I stuck the label on here so I would be able to find this more easily. So this is a very cool assortment of chips and something that I'm really glad to have. And finally, we have these two computer facts books. So this one here is the technical service data from the Commodore 64. Well, let's take a quick gander inside of this. Oh, it seems like the binding has come apart a little bit. So we have preliminary service checks, general operating instructions. Oh, it tells you how to use your Commodore 64, I guess. Gives you a couple troubleshooting steps. So there's the motherboard layout for one of the more common breadboard motherboards. What is this here? We have a little bit of a block diagram, how these ICs interact with each other, RF modulator. And of course, with these troubleshooting steps here, it's referring to ICs that are on these diagrams here, so it helps you probably identify some of those ICs if you're a total novice when it comes to troubleshooting the 64. All right, neat. This is typical of the SAMs. What this probably is, yep, this is exactly what this is. These are at least the general schematic layouts for the 64, and SAMs, as far as I understand, they reverse engineered and did this all themselves. They didn't rely on the factory schematics. But if you're familiar with how SAMs went about creating their own schematics, yeah, let me know in the comment section below. I'll be very curious because I don't have a lot of experience in using their documents, but I have seen people on other YouTube channels who do rely on their stuff, especially for fixing old TVs and radios and stuff like that. One thing that was really cool about the SAMs is once you got very used to reading their schematics, they did them all in the very same design style. So it was really easy to move from one device to another if you were always looking at the SAM schematics. And they give you little waveforms here. If you're hooking up an oscilloscope for troubleshooting, you have all the voltages on all the different pins on the ICs. So you can kind of gauge to see if things are way out of whack or, accurate. Now, of course, with a computer, it's digital data, it's lots of transitions and whatnot on the various signals. So measuring this, 74LS257 and seeing 2.88 volts on that pin is not always the most accurate thing. But at least if you just see a solid 0 volts all the time, or maybe a solid 5 volts, that could help you in some situations. I think it was a lot more useful when you're working on analog equipment like television sets, radios, and other consumer electronics. I'm assuming this schematic is available on the internet for the 64, but if it's not, let me know in the comment section below and I can scan this stuff in. And here they just show all the various ICs and the pinout of them and all of the other components, the connectors, stuff like that. Very handy. Very, very handy. On this page here, they have turned the entire motherboard into a grid so you can find all the components really quickly. And that's probably even useful for me to this day, because occasionally I'm reading something on the internet that says, oh, we need to cut resistor, R6. Well, on this motherboard design, of course, R6 is in J27. So you go to J and you go to 27. So R6 is in this little box right here. How handy is that? Extremely handy. And right here should be a list of all of the parts. Yep, so we have the item number, the type, the manufacturer part number, so the Commodore part number, and then we have replacement part numbers as well. Very handy in the days before the internet, because you have to think about it. The part numbers, when you go between various things, like on this 74LS08, it's pretty much easy to tell all the way across the board what it is. But here we look at a transistor 2N4401. Commodore gave you a part number of 902-652-01, but the part numbers of all these other manufacturers are like all over the place. MPS A05, NTE 123AP. You needed these books or these charts to cross-reference across these different manufacturers so you could figure out what the heck you needed to put into a computer. So then you just take all the PhotoFax stuff from that one thing and you just put it together back into the folder. You would put them in your file cabinet like this so that as you flip through, you could see the top here and there would be a book you could look in from Sam's to figure out that the Commodore 64 was CC4. And they might have had other Commodore 64 motherboard revisions as well, which might be CC5, things like that. And if we take this one, which is for the 128D, and we look here, here's the SAMS number CS25, and again, you just stick that on your file cabinet. And this one's going to be a lot more of the same for the 128D, which is a bit more of a complicated machine. Of course, it has an integrated power supply, which is what that is there. And it just keeps on going and on and on and on for the 128D, just because it's a lot more complicated than the 64. Well, this is great. I have the 128D, and here is the schematic for the power supply. So if I ever have a problem there, this is extremely useful. Again, I don't know if this is available on the internet, so if it's not, let me know. This will be for part of the disk drive here. We have the read-write amplifier that goes to the read heads. Keyboard matrix for the 128D keyboard. Oh, no, that's cool. We have the schematics for the RF modulator. And with all my work reverse engineering the ones on the 64, I know that the Luma output is pretty clear, and that's because there really appears to be no filtering going on this upper stage here. But there is a 330 picofarad that feeds the video signal into the RF stage. This generates the RF output. So it's reasonable to assume they're going to be filtering that. The color input has that same inductor and capacitor thing going on with 64, which causes that color smearing. But I guess it's there for some particular reason. But if you follow this through, it goes through this buffer here, and it comes out the chroma output, or it goes up and is combined with the Luma, both for the RF, and here's the composite output here, which is just a combination of chroma and Luma. So thank you very much, Tim, for sending me this stuff. I really appreciate it. And it's a real shame that the 64 broke, but it goes to show how fragile this plastic is. Any stress will break this stuff. Hopefully some of the viewers will put some good comments on how to glue this thing so I can at least glue this 64 back together, even though it won't be perfect. I'll be fine with that because this is still a nice top. All right. Oh, the next package, it's really heavy. It's from Bill in Santa Cruz, California. Hi to all my California viewers. The nice thing about priority mail, this is a priority mailbox from the United States Post Office, is it is flat rate. So it's a fixed cost no matter how heavy it is. You could theoretically put bricks in here. I'd wonder if you could put lead bricks, if they would still ship that. But this is really heavy. I'd almost think that this has books or something in here because of the extra weight. But like I said, that's what's cool about priority mail. It's not cheap. These large boxes are kind of expensive, but it's a good way to ship stuff if the contents are very heavy. Right off the bat, I see something very cool. It says MOS on here. So that is from Moss Technologies. Okay, so he sent a note, which we'll look at in a sec. So it looks like this is fully packed with discs and documentation and old stuff at that. So this little card is from Moss Technologies, and it's the MCS 6500 instruction set summary. So this is an envelope that actually has canceled stamps and a shipping address, and I'm not going to show it because there might be personal information, but it's addressed to Commodore Business Machines in Santa Clara, California, 3330 Scott Boulevard. Was this the actual address of Commodore's office? 3330 Scott Boulevard? I'll have to look that up. It comes from Eastern House Software in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. What's in here exactly? So in this bag, it is Pet Rabbit, copyright 1979, executes at hex 7000. So there's documentation and an audio cassette. The Pet Rabbit currently works with the 16K and 32K new ROM PETs, which have external Commodore cassette deck. Most units have the built-in deck will not work with the Rabbit high-speed cassette recording rate, but versions are being prepared for the old PET ROMs and other microcomputers which use the 6502. Here's what the Pet Rabbit is. The Pet Rabbit is 2K of machine code, which, when loaded and initialized, provides 12 additional commands that can be executed in BASIC's directs mode. In addition to the commands, automatic repeat of any key held down for 0.5 seconds is also provided. This should greatly aid in inputting characters and providing more convenient cursor control. And what's this in here? This is something that look like schematics. Oh boy, wow. Wow, okay, so there's a giant schematic sheet here. In the bottom right corner, it says Pet Shack. So I'm wondering if this is some type of third-party schematics for the pet. I'd say yes, this probably is. There's a 6502, 6520, 6522, another 6520. This definitely looks like the pet. User port, IEEE 488 port. Wow. Like original vintage schematics for the pet. This is incredible. This is a serious treasure trove. I am blown away. Looks like we have a brochure for the Commodore 64. Commodore 64 could be the microcomputer industry's outstanding new product introduction since the birth of the industry. Ah, yes. Okay, we'll look at that in a second. Here's an interesting box. I wonder what this is. It's got a diagnostic clip that looks like it would clip onto, say, the CPU, and then this blue box has an LED and a button. I wonder if this is some kind of diagnostic for the PET. Oh, we have the manual for the Commodore PET machine language monitor. Oh, wow. And also the manual for Big Time and Squiggle. I have these original tapes. George, who donated the PET 2001 to me, donated the original Big Time and Squiggle, and on the other side has a machine language monitor tape. So I have the original tape. This is the manual for that. Goes into the whole program listing on Big Time and Squiggle. And incidentally, I have one of those SD adapters for the PET. So if anyone wants a copy of Squiggle in Big Time, I can now get that to you because I have a way to get it off the tape and into a file that you can load onto your own PET. Okay, so the box just has a cornucopia more of stuff. There's another random ROM chip that's sort of floating in the box. 6502 assembly language. Here's another book, the PET Commodore Personal Computer Guide. It was published by McGraw-Hill. Ah, this is neat. And it's an actual official Commodore price list from 1982. Okay, we'll take a look at that in a second. Oh, and look at this. The Commodore PET User Club newsletter. This is so neat. And there's another newsletter here. This one is from 1979, Volume 1, Issue 4, Issue 5. This one is Volume 1, Issue 1. Wow. All right, so we have some more stuff here that has personal information, so I won't show that right now. All right, there is an envelope here, and on it, it says, test connectors used with the small blue box. So sure enough, there is a keyboard loopback connector here, and another loopback connector that looks like it's either for the IEEE port or the user port. There's still more stuff here. With an original Shugart Associates mini diskettes. Shugart actually was the designer of these disk drives that were in all the early machines. The original IBM PC and the Commodores used Shugart branded drives. So it's kind of neat to have a box that's got their brand on it. But I guess there's some software in here. It just says cursor. All of this stuff says cursor. It has some numbers on it. So I'll have to see what this is. Maybe the note will say. Oh, on the top here it says Cursor Magazines. So perhaps this was some type of a disk-based magazine for the Commodore PET, which means I won't be able to read these, right? Because I don't have a disk drive at this point, but that might be neat to look at in the future. And there's another box of discs, and it's just chocked full of stuff. I absolutely love the way that these floppy disks look. I love the artwork that's on these. It's so late 70s looking, and these were when these floppy disks were so expensive. And in 1979, $1 was worth probably a few dollars today's money. So if this disc costs $3, that's like $9 to buy one floppy disk. So you really coveted these discs back then. This was not something that you'd, treat badly and you might accidentally break. You took really good care of your discs. All right, so there's still more stuff. Here is the 2040 service manual. 2040, is that the disk drive? Is that one of those Commodore disk drives? Oh, yeah, it must be, because it's got motor speed tests and stuff like that. And on the front page here, we have an introduction. The 2040 Dual Disk System Service Kit will provide the service center means to isolate defective components or subassemblies by way of utilizing the internal diagnostics of the 2040. Program diagnostics and troubleshooting diagnostic guides included with the diskette and cassette. And next up is CPU CN. I assume this is the Commodore PET User Club newsletter, and this one looks a lot more fancy than those early ones. This one says Volume 3, Issue 1. All right, so I've just taken this stuff out of the box. So this envelope says Bill on the front and his last name, which I will not show. And we'll take this stuff out. All right, yeah, I just took this out. So this is more stuff for the pet. Dear pet owner, thank you for your order. We at Pet Shack take great pride in our products and hope you are completely satisfied. Hey, Pet Shack, those schematics we looked at earlier for the PET 2001, those were from Pet Shack. Take a look at the enclosed list of our fine products and see if there's anything else that we can serve you with. We have some more schematics here. Oh, look. It's actually the PCB layout for the 2001. Neat. All right, and look, this is the schematics for the analog board inside the CRT. And very cool, the analog board parts layout diagram. And here's the schematics for the cassette drive. And lastly, we have a blue folder, and this appears to be a bunch of floppy disks. Word Pro 4 Plus, education software, and it has little printouts showing, oops, well, that just fell out, showing everything that's on these disks. Here's one called Frank's Disk, and here's another floppy that just says some common basic programs for the Commodore PET. Check that out. That's interesting. And I can see on the back, there are a ton of programs on here. So be curious if these disks even work, and then curious to see what these programs even do, and if these have been archived anywhere on the internet. Well, what an extravaganza from Bill. I need to dig under here and try to find his letter. All right, so here is Bill's letter, and it's from the 18th of April, Adrian Black. Dear Adrian, I found a box of Commodore stuff while cleaning up my garage. It was leftovers from when I worked back at Commodore in California. I thought you could use it. There is a blue box production bootloader. As I remember, you clip the 40 clip on the 6502. The green connector goes in the user port and the brown connector goes in the keyboard port. You power on the PET and press the red button. The clip quick loads the PET with a production test. You remove the clip and away it goes. I think they preloaded the PET motherboards with a test just before they went into burn-in. I don't have a PET anymore to test it, so good luck. I enjoy your YouTube channel and watch a lot. I really like the effort you put into getting these old systems running again. Thanks. Bill, ex-Commodore engineer, Santa Cruz, California. Wow, so that's really cool. So that address I saw on that envelope was actually Commodore's headquarters in Santa Clara, California. And I guess Bill, when he was an engineer there, ordered a piece of software and had it shipped to him at the office. All right, so there's a ton to look at here. Let me go take a closer look at this on the bench. Well, this is a lot of stuff here to look through. Look at this cornucopia. So why don't I just try to do a couple highlights, because there's clearly way too much to look at everything here. It would make a long-ass video. Let's start with this little test harness thing. I'm really curious about this. So we have 3 parts. So this is definitely a keyboard loopback connector. So this would plug into where the keyboard connects to the motherboard normally. And that would allow the test jig to test out the keyboard I/O ports. And then this is almost certainly for, I don't know, is this for the user port or is this for the IEEE port? Now I think both of those have the same number of pins on the PET. Now you can see it's all jumpered together except for a few of the pins, and then we have this wire. So if you recognize what this is exactly on the bottom, that doesn't say anything useful. If you recognize if this is user port or IEEE, let me know and I will write what it is on here so I can test this out. And then we have this little box. So this definitely clips onto the CPU. Now, unfortunately, we have a little bit of breakage here on this plastic part. This sort of gives it some structure. And hopefully that doesn't render this inoperative, but you would squeeze this and put the IC there and release, and that would make contact with all the pins. I doubt we can buy these things anymore. You can see here AP Incorporated, but hopefully this does still work even though it's got this broken section. And here's the little box. It has the LED and it has a single button, just a momentary switch. Now in the note, it mentioned that you clip this onto the CPU, power on the computer, wait for the red light, I think, and push this momentary button and let go. That's certainly interesting. That would imply that this will load itself into RAM, I guess, and then it would continue running even with this thing removed from the computer. You would want to leave these connected to the machine though, of course. Now let's open this thing up and take a look inside. Well, there we go. That's the inside of this thing. Now, I think it's hard on the camera to read the part number of this chip, but it's a MOS MPS 901442 maybe? 25th week of 1979. Here we have a 74 LS138, a diode, capacitor, the button, the LED, we have a dropper resistor, and another socket there. And up here it says bootloader 2, and right there, part number 320370 Rev A. Let me do a quick Google to see if information on this is available on the internet. Yeah, I'm really unable to find any information on this thing at all. I can't really get a good read on the part number of that chip. I've tried using this, but the paint on there is just not clear. I thought it was 901447, but Googling for that comes up with a PET character ROM, and I can't imagine that this is simply just a character ROM. That doesn't really make sense. So if you have any additional knowledge of how this is supposed to be used, or you want me to do any investigation with this thing, please reach out to me on my channel About page. There's an email address. Some guidance on trying this out would be really appreciated. I'm kind of wary to just go and connect it up to my PET to see what happens. Moving on, we have some neat stuff. So this is the MOS 6500, so 6502 instruction set cheat sheet. Now you have to have really good eyesight to read this, but hopefully I've zoomed up good enough. So we have the mnemonic, the operation, and then we have all of this stuff here, which I'm not really good at CPU programming, so I don't fully understand all of this, but this is just a handy little quick reference guide. And then right here we have little tables that show memory and addresses. So I assume this is for the 0 page on how these instructions down here, IRQ and blah, 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 and JSR, use a little bit of RAM to function. If you don't have 0 page, at least these instructions won't work. That's my understanding, at least. And look, a little table here of 7-bit ASCII character sets, and there's even a mistake. A little back arrow is actually underscore, which someone's wrote. Is this how it would look on tape, like a paper tape? So Bill sent along all of this stuff here, which looks like stuff that maybe has never been seen or scanned on the internet before. Seems like a third-party company has come up with schematics of various things. So this is the cassette drive board layout. Here we have the schematic for one of the cassette drives inside the PET, so PET tape electronics. And this looks like the analog board as well. So again, I don't know if stuff like this is commonly available on the internet. This is the early PET 2001 board layout. I can tell because this is matching what I have, which has these larger MPS 6550 SRAM chips. This is for the 8K that it comes with. It wasn't long after the original machine, so they switched to, I think, 2114 SRAM chips here and more common ROM chips, so you don't have to worry about trying to find these when these fail, and they do. And then here's schematics for the PET video monitor. Again, I just don't know if this stuff is commonly available out there on the internet. This looks like the data sheet for the 6550 SRAM chips using the first PET. I'm assuming, oh, it's actually not a data sheet, it's more like a one-pager, because here is the read-only ROM data sheet or whatever, one-pager. So again, I figure, oh, this actually has a back page. I figure this stuff is available out there, but again, if not, let me know. This looks like more on the ROM chip. Timing diagrams. Here's a very simple keyboard matrix for the original PET keyboard. So we have 1 through 10 and A through H. And it just tells you when you push on a key, like this key here, it's 8 and D that are connected together. And that's how the computer knows you push the key. Look, this says temp drawing right here, but this is probably what Commodore did when they modified the motherboard to take the 2114 SRAM chips as opposed to those original Commodore ones. They added an LS139, probably this LS00, they used those existing ones. And this is the extra chip select lines that are running to these various SRAM chips and look, 2316 standard ROM chips as opposed to those ridiculous Commodore bespoke ones. Another temp drawing could be sort of something similar. Here's the cover page. This is from Pet Shack. So they did all this work. Now, it's funny that someone who worked at Commodore would have ordered this stuff. Maybe they wanted to compare the Commodore schematics to this other stuff, because this would have been third party, right? Done totally externally of Commodore. So that's a bit interesting. Bill worked for Commodore, right? And he ordered this stuff because there was an envelope showing that Pet Shack had sent this to him. So I have to wonder, what was the exact use case of these documents when you figure Commodore had all the documentation that was needed. And here's a bunch of data sheets for all the various components, probably that we used inside the PET. Would have been handy if you were doing troubleshooting on your PET, but of course, nowadays we can just look this stuff up. This stuff should be available online. Like, this is the original 2114 SRAM chip data sheet. So again, if some of this stuff seems like it's bespoke, let me know, but I have a feeling all of this is available. Oh, here's something from Pet Shack. Look at this. The ROM and RAM chips used in your PET may not be the same as used in the author's PET. According to the best information I've been able to get, Commodore is using two different chips. For the RAMs, they're either using 6550s or 2114s, and for the ROMs, they're either using 6540s or 2316s. Even though the pinouts are different, the function is identical, and the actual wiring should be identical with the exception of the chip select lines. But definitely the 2114s and the 6550s, they use a different socket entirely, so you can't just plug them in. Now, I know people have made little adapter PCBs that allow you to use the later chips in the same sockets. Where 2316s are used in place of 6550s, inverters have to be added. The implementation of the 2114 in place of the 6550 is a bit more difficult, and there is only one chip select line. And 74LS139 has to be added to decode the address lines to replace the missing chip select lines. A partial schematic is included to show the changes. Well, if you couldn't find the 6550s and you needed to use 2115s, you probably could wire something up, at least kind of hack it together using this information. Now, this is going to be hard for me to show, but Pet Shack also has a full schematic for the entire PET 2001. Here it is. It's obviously way too big to show on camera. It's very clear, and I'm not sure if something this clear is available for the 2001 out there. Here's some more random stuff. So a couple 2764s, but they're not labeled in a way that I can tell what these are. There's lots of PET floppy disks here that I don't have a way to read right now because I don't have a disk drive that's compatible with the PET. This one says Bill's disk on here. Just various things here. Let's slide these out, take a look. Music demo. Curious what that's all about. Basic 8. This one says May development, DOS 4.0. Now, this is definitely for the PET. Now, I suppose I could put these into a 64 and read them. Actually, that's an interesting concept. Could I put these disks into a disk drive plugged into a PC with something like Star Commander and copy everything off of it and then put it onto an SD card? I have a PET to SD, so I can use SD cards on my PET, at least the later PETs, and I wonder if I can copy this stuff off of here using Star Commander. That's something I really need to try out. ASM backup. This one says Butterfields. So it says development disk 1. Just has a bunch of stuff on here. Oh, look, here's another disk that says music demo. I'm wondering if this is just for the beep speaker on the later PETs or what this was exactly, but there's a Fast Wedge 4.1 music demo, and then look, a bunch of songs, including one that says stereo music. So I'll be very curious about this. Oh, but look at the date, 1979. So we know this is for the very early PETs. This one here says advanced music, sine Fs and classical music. And then here we have games. I assume all of this stuff is forever archived on the internet, but I suppose it may not be. So again, I need to try to figure out how to read this stuff. Games 3. And there's just a whole lot. Look, there's Eliza for the PET. Hangman, Iron Planet, Lemonade, Blackjack 10.0, Stock Market, couple Star Trek games. Just says Games 3 on here. Hopefully these discs actually work. Let's take a quick look. Yeah, it's looking a little oxidized. I don't see any kind of mold, but there's a good chance that that's not going to read very well, just due to the oxidization on these floppies. Oh, here's the printout that goes with Butterfields. So there's ROM test, copycat, demo sort, keyboard record, Landslide 3, Acrobat. So it's kind of a 3D maze. Obviously, it's a combination of games and other useful programs. Make sure I store these printouts back with these floppies so I can kind of tell what they are. Series 1s. Oh, this is more games. Look, Motorcycle Jump, Crack the Safe, Perpetual Calendar, Clock, Savings Account, just a random assortment of games and programs. Here we are with games 2. Big Time. Hey, there's Big Time, which I had on that one cassette that came with the PET 2001 that I got from George. And there's Squiggle, which was on the back of that tape. That's cool to have a disc copy of that. So neat. A bunch of games. That's games 2 from 1979. This disc says Adventure. What is all these adventure boots? Oh, is this just the video game Adventure? Wow, this disc is very brown colored. The the central part, it's really kind of scratched up. Oh, and the back is a mess. I'll be very surprised if this disc reads at all. Has something called Android NIM and PAL 4. ROM test is on there again. This one says Games and Programming Disc. So, wow, there's a lot of programs on here. Definitely some games, Zap and Word Search, and there's Star Trek again, random. Neat, just a assortment of stuff. All right, when I talked about archiving the PET discs, I talked about using a PC. I don't know why I didn't just think about using the Commodore 64. I plugged the SDIEC in using a 1571 disk drive, and Commodore Commander, you can copy files right over. Now, you can also create D64 disk images, which I thought would actually be just easier to do that. But for some reason, when I try to make it, it keeps bumping the head. It goes, so I don't know what's going on. I actually stuck a 64 disk in here and made a disk image and it worked perfectly. But it's doing the copy, although it's stopped right now. It says problem reading demo sort. So yeah, I figured these disks are going to be flaky. This is the Butterfields disk. So I hit enter and I think it should keep copying. Although it's kind of annoying because I have to watch this thing and every time there's a disk error, which will probably be all the time because these disks are pretty old, I'm just going to have to keep hitting enter every time there's an error. Now there's actually another box of disks here as well, so we have more stuff. And these don't have any printouts in them. So this just says cursor 1 to 7, 8 to 12, 13 to 17, 18 to 22. Seems to be the same thing copied twice. Was this a magazine or something like that? Cursor magazine? Looking in the box, there was definitely a few more things here. So these Commodore discs here, oh, it says Word Processor 2. I don't think I've ever seen a Commodore disc label that's black like this. I guess I haven't seen that many. I didn't have a Commodore disk drive back in the day, so maybe this was common. But Word Processor 2, obviously, we're talking about some kind of PET word processor. This manual has very tiny writing. Welcome to the fast-growing ranks of microcomputer users. We are discovering the immensely practical and varied powers of word processing. Your new Word Processor 2 program exhibits lightning speed and superb precision inherent in professional machine language programming. This software program has been designed for use with the Commodore PET and Commodore's models 2001-16 and -32N or B variant. And here's an errata sheet that came with Word Processor 2. Look at this. Word Processor 2 program will not operate on your computer without the special Word Pro ROM supplied with a diskette and installed in position UD5 circuit board, the leftmost empty ROM slot. Well, that's unfortunate, so I can't even test this. I don't have the ROM. These are definitely not them. These are 2764, so these don't work in the PET. So that's a bummer. Bill told me that he had a PET, of course, at home, but he got rid of it quite a long time ago. So this ROM chip might have been installed in his computer and it's gone. Let's take a look at this here. Commodore 64. Commodore 64 could be the microcomputer industry's outstanding new product introduction since the birth of the industry. $5.95. You could get what nobody else can give you for twice the price. This machine was definitely ahead of its time. And look at this, the old silver label 64. So this would have been one of the very earliest ones, I presume. Nice. Look at these really simplistic graphics here. Of course, as the 64 aged, people understood how to program it better, and it pushed the limits so beyond what it was doing originally when it first came out. But yeah, look at this very simplistic modem use. Look at this. Why did the 64 come from Commodore and not someone else? Because we make our own chips. That's quite a bold claim. The TI-99 4A was made by Texas Instruments, which also made their own chips, and it wasn't nearly as capable. Now, I apologize to anyone who loves the TI. I know there's a lot of people, but you have to admit the 64 was far more capable than the TI. I mean, I know the TI was a 16-bit processor, a true 16-bit processor, but it was so hampered. And then, of course, the graphics and sound on it were just nothing compared to what the SID and the VIC chip could do in this thing. So here's a little comparison chart. So launch price of $595. Pretty good deal for this thing, I guess in 1982. 64K of RAM, blah, blah, blah. 170K per disk. So that was pretty good. The disk format the 1541 used was pretty advanced for squeezing a lot of data onto the disk. Now, of course, it was incredibly slow. Not a fault of the format of the disk, just the way it connected to the computer. Hi-fi output, yes. Music synthesizer, yes. Sound generator, yes. TV output, yes. Smart peripherals, yes. CPM option, over 1,000 programs, yes. So that's interesting that that came out early on in the 64's life. Game cartridges, yes. So compared to the Apple II Plus, which was the contemporary at the time, $1,530, and that only gave you 48K of RAM. Of course, it had pathetic sound. Of course, it says sound generator. Yes, I mean, it could beep, but it had no synthesizer, which it does say no. It did not have an RF modulator built in, just had composite output. You had to plug it into the motherboard on the 2 Plus. Did have CPM capability, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, here's the IBM PC. Interesting, it shows it at $1,500 because that was such a base model. I think realistically, when you had a PC outfitted with a monitor and the Model F keyboard and disk drive, it cost way more than that. And here's the TRS-80 Model 3, $999, pretty good price. Did only come with 16K of RAM, 178K per disk, which is interesting. I didn't realize it actually could store more than the PC because the TRS-80 and the PC use the same disk format. I mean, it's MFM recording onto the floppy disk, right? Single-sided, which is why it's not 360K like the later disks. Now, the TRS-80 Model 3, it says CPM option. Was there really a CPM option for the Model 3? The Model 4 could run CPM natively, but I don't think the Model 3 could at all. I mean, not that I've ever heard of, but I guess I'm not an expert. But yeah, this was certainly not a game machine, but it had a very good 64-column screen, a really good keyboard. I mean, it was a great computer for doing the kind of business-type applications over the 64, which, you know, you only had 40 columns and TV-type output, so it just wasn't as good for those things, but it was so much better for games and, you know, general home use. Oh, and they're comparing it to the Atari 800, which $900. Whew, yeah, that's a lot more expensive than the 64. And I know people are going to say the 800 was a very capable machine, and yes, it certainly was, but it had been out for longer, so I assume that price dropped very quickly as soon as the 64 came out. They probably went to meet it. Yeah, the 800, it was a decent machine, but not as good as the 64. I mean, I'm probably talking heresy, and I think a lot of people are going to be angry, but hey, this was Commodore's marketing spin on a comparison to its contemporaries. There's a manual that goes with my PET 2001, and it's for basically how to program all the I/O ports on the PET. I mean, that's just amazing that Commodore just gave you stuff like this. They told you every way you could communicate with every port on here, how to connect to it, how it electrically worked, all the registers and values inside. This is just not anything. Oh, look at that. Write protect tabs for floppy disk. I'll quickly show you some of the books that came here. So here's the manual for Squiggle and Big Time, the cassette that I got with the 2001. Like I mentioned, there's a copy on these floppy disks here. But how fun to have the actual manual for these. Talks about the program flow, how it actually works, and then you flip this around. Oh, there's the machine language monitor. That's right, the tape itself, one side of it was the machine language monitor. When you flipped it like this, the other side was Squiggle and Big Time. And I suppose in case your tape broke, here's the actual program listing for Squiggle version 2. I don't know if that's actually the version that's on my tape. And then here's Big Time. And there's the basic program, Big Time 2.0 non-stop. Wait a second, this listing here for Big Time, it says originally by Scott Naukus, modified by B. Seiler. B. Seiler? That's Bill, who sent me all this stuff. What? Bill? So you made a modification to Big Time and what I suppose to Squiggle? You can find the program listing there. Wait, so Bill, it says that you wrote this, B. Seiler and G. Yob, and idea by Paul Hiddle. Okay. I think this is really neat. On my PET 2001 series, where I got my PET 2001 all back together and nice and cleaned up, I ran Big Time at the end. It was a clock that was showing on the screen. And I remember people saying I might burn my screen if I leave that running. Of course, I didn't leave that running for a long time. How cool that Bill had something to do with those programs. So here's a third-party book on the PETs. Now this is for the 2001 ends, or the later version of the PET. But yeah, it looks like a programming guide for it. I mean, actually it looks like it works for the old Dash 8 that I have as well. And we have this green 6502 assembly language programming book. Comment in the comment section below if you have had a copy of this book yourself and learned how to program with this book. Okay, I touched on this earlier. So this is the service manual for the 2040 disk drive. This is one of the old original PET disk drives. So again, if this stuff is not available on the internet, let me know and I'll take this apart, scan this in, upload the PDF. Looks like it has a parts reference. Oh, for the SA390s, that would be the floppy drive that's in there. Basic programs on stuff like that. Looks like information on doing the head alignment. Here are the user manuals for the dual disk drives, and there's the 2040 right there. So that's what that service manual is for. Neat. It's just stuff on how to use those disk drives. Here's an original Commodore manual for the 2001-16, 16N, 32, and 32N. So that's cool. The binding, unfortunately, is not holding together so well. Yeah, no, look at that. So that was unfortunate. Shopping for software. I guess this was original Commodore software that they sold or they made. BPI, VisiCalc, they didn't make that. OZZ, Information Management. So this was definitely more business oriented, and it appears that, so this worked on an 8032 or a 4032, but it needs 32K of RAM. That's for VisiCalc. Tax preparation software. Imagine preparing your taxes on a PET. You know, I suppose it was probably really good at the time. Medical accounting systems required an 8032 and dual disk drives and a printer. Hey, you know, if you have a doctor's office, imagine using a Commodore PET to do all your billing on. How awesome. And then we have this blue folder here, which I recall is floppy disks. All right. This one here says Pug Silicon Valley, I guess. Val apostrophe Y. More games, right? Brainstorm, Ends, Equations, Big Math, Cash Register, Eliza, another copy of Eliza, several versions of Hangman. Oh, this is quite a lot of software on here. This disc here has more education software, optical illusions on there again. Hey, VisiCalc 1.47, and there's VisiCalc 40 and VisiCalc 80. This is business stuff, I guess. IRR, cash flow, investment growth, fair option value, electronic calculator, directory 791105, decision maker. Showed this off on the unboxing. Some common basic programs for the PET. Well, certainly when you look at these names, everything appears to be edutainment, sort of basic related, trigonometry, matrix, sort of mathematics. There's a little bit of finance stuff on here. Linear regressions, F distributions. Interesting. And I think we've reached the end of this book. There's one more floppy here. Disc number 0, solar addresses. Beats me. Maybe there's personal stuff on this disc. Who knows? And we're almost at the end of the box. All right, what's this soft swap? This is some type of microcomputer disk order form. So I think this was maybe for some education software. There's someone's address on here. So I've covered that up with paper. Back when first class US stamps were 20 cents. That's amazing. Look at this company named Computer Using Educators. Were you a computer using educator? In other words, were you a teacher that knew how to use a computer? Here's a little section here, progress report. As of January 1982, there were over 40 disks of programs. More than 1,000 disks have been sold by mail, and hundreds have been given away to visitors to the center. Since any soft swap disk may be copied and distributed freely, the programs have no doubt traveled far beyond the original audience. Maybe if I just read the header here, I would understand what the hell this was about. SoftSwap is a project originated by Vince Contreras at San Jose State University. It receives donations of public domain software, evaluates and refines the programs, and sells completed disks at a nominal fee. We all have to remember that in 1982, when this stuff was happening, computers were just barely a thing. They were just starting to take off. So many people had never used a computer in their entire life, and these grassroots efforts existed to try to get software into people's hands so they could start using the computers that they went and bought, which were really expensive at the time, using them for education purposes or learning things that weren't generally available. You bought the computer, turned it on, it just gave you a basic prompt. It wasn't like it did anything. It's so different than today, where say you get something like this Apple iPad and you just connect to the App Store and you have access to everything you can imagine under the sun. And even with a regular PC or Mac, it's the same thing. You just go on the internet and right away you're downloading software and you're doing whatever you want. This was just a different era back then. It was so grassroots compared to where we are now. So is it better back then? I mean, no, I think it's better that everyone has access to technology now, but it certainly had a really cool feeling when you were involved with this stuff back in the day. I was lucky enough to get my first computer in 1982. It was a Commodore VIC-20. I was just 7 years old, and it was a blast. I had so much fun reading magazines, typing in programs, sharing tapes with friends. I mean, it's just a different world. So just flipping through this is some of the stuff they had available. So it says Apple Dissemination Disc number 8, California School for the Deaf, Math 1. And this was just a bunch of math programs for the Apple II. Drill, Apple Barrel. Estimation is taught by guessing numbers of apples in Farmer John's barrels. Now it says E16K int and E32K int. That must mean that these were written in integer basic. The original Apple IIs came with an integer basic that later got upgraded to AppleSoft Basic. There are some differences that these programs probably wouldn't run properly, although you could load integer basic on newer Apple IIs, so you could run these. It would basically require an Apple II Plus with 64K, and it would load the new basic into that upper memory. I think it would map out the basic ROM and switch over to it, and then you could actually run this stuff here. Stalker. 2 students compete against each other in destroying Star Wars Imperial stalkers. What's a stalker? A stalker is destroyed by answering correctly an elementary math problem. ES32K integer basic. And here we've made it to the Commodore PET User Club newsletter. Here we are, 1979, Volume 1, Issue 1. Now, as I've said earlier in this video, if this stuff's not available on the internet, please let me know. I will cut the binding off this, and then I'll scan this stuff in as PDFs and upload it so they're publicly available. On the inside of the cover here, this is interesting. Check this out. The Advanced Technology Headquarters for your high technology company. Before the end of 1978 calendar year, Commodore's new executive offices will be located in one of the first 2 solar energy industrial buildings in the United States, quite possibly the world. Solar power will supply 90% of the heating, hot water, and air conditioning requirements of the 60,000 square foot building, virtually eliminating the need for fossil fuel, winter or summer. It is fitting that your company engaged in high technology electronics should establish headquarters in one of the most advanced technology buildings ever designed. Who knew that Commodore was at least trying to think green in 1977 and 78? That's pretty damn cool. Does anyone know if these buildings still exist today? I take it this is it right here, right? These slanted slab-looking buildings. So even though, like I had mentioned, I'd been using computers, Commodore computer actually, as far back as 1982, I never was a member of any of these user groups. I mean, I was just a kid, right? So these were probably meant more for adults. But nonetheless, this is a really cool little bit of history. It's just Commodore trying to bring together its users of its fledgling computer, which was pretty popular at the time, and the PET really took off in popularity. Think about this was before computer magazines probably really existed, at least dedicated bespoke ones for individual systems. So if you subscribe to the user group here, you'd get these, it would give you information about new product announcements and probably other stuff like basic listings and just general information about the computer. So here's a price list of things available in 1979. So the PET 2001-8, that's the computer that I have. Standard PET with integral cassette and calculator type keyboard, 8K of RAM, $795. I wonder how much it cost in 1977 when it first came out. Of course, availability is there now, of course, 2 years later. So it says 7167 net. That's obviously bytes free when you turn it on of the 8K RAM. They had an expanded user manual covering all facets of the operation and the I/O, $10. If you wanted to upgrade to the 2001-16, which had the better keyboard, right? It had 16K of RAM and large keyboard with separate numeric pad and graphics on keys. External optional cassette drive, so that was $1,000. you get to spend an extra $200. And it actually wasn't quite out yet. It came out in May 1979. Extra $200 for double the RAM, and you have to buy the cassette drive separately, but you did have the better keyboard, so that's probably a big improvement over the chiclet one. And then there was the 16B, which was the business variant. The N version was like the graphics keyboard. It had the PET characters. The B had no PET as far as I understand. It says standard typewriter keyboard, no graphic key. Same price, though. You could opt for either of them. If you wanted to go to 32K of RAM, it was an extra $200. It seemed that May 79 was actually when all of these variants came out. So really, this 8K chiclet keyboard version was essentially on sale for 2 whole years before May 79 came around, and then probably replaced this one. I don't know if you can still buy this when these came out. Okay, on the next page, imagine this coming from, say, a company like Apple. For those of you who are handier than most, you may wish to order the PET 2001-8 Service Kit, part number 32405, which contains the following: a booklet testing the PET computer, a cassette with PET test programs, 2 connectors, video display circuit schematic and supplement, parts location for the video display assembly component cross-reference, main logic board schematics, 9 sheets, main logic board assembly component cross-reference. Send your check for $30. $30. $30 gave you a lot of information on what you need to fix your PET. Although that's probably more like $100 today, that's still pretty damn cool that you could just mail away for schematics. Imagine what Louis Rossmann could say if he could call up Apple and pay them a couple $100 and get schematics for the latest MacBook. I don't want to go off topic too much, but right to repair, it's a topic that's fascinating, and it's something that is so important. Back in this day, you didn't have to worry about right to repair because this information was so freely available. But now these manufacturers say that giving out the schematics is like trade secrets and it's confidential and proprietary. And yet back then with this, it wasn't. So it really feels like to me the goal of not releasing schematics is less about trade secrets and other crap like that. It's more to do with not letting people be able to fix their own stuff so that when it breaks, they have to throw it away and buy a new one, or say take it to the Apple store where they tell you that, oh, there's one chip that's bad on the motherboard. Well, they don't tell you that. There's, say there's one little tiny part like a capacitor that's shorted on the motherboard. They tell you the whole motherboard is junk and it needs to be replaced, and that costs $1,000 or whatever. This really outrageous repair cost. When in reality, it's a shorted tantalum capacitor that you can just replace with some hot air and the board is fixed. Anyway, it was 40 years ago that you could just send a check and they would just mail it to you, and they encouraged it. I mean, if you're handier than most. Isn't that amazing? Interesting. Okay, here we go. New peripherals and attachments. Look at this. PET 2021 printer, 80 column dot matrix printer with full PET graphics capability. $549. Let that sink in. That the printer costs $549 and the entire PET 2001 computer costs $749. Like, what? That is so out of whack. And then there's a 2022 80 column dot matrix printer with plain paper or forms handling tractor feed. So maybe this one's not a tractor feed printer, and it's $1,000. This costs $200 more than the PET 2001-8 and as much as the 16K one. It's just a dot matrix printer. In this day and age, we buy inkjet printers for, $60, use them for a while, they stop working, you throw them away, you buy another. This would probably be like $3,000 in today's money. PET 2023 80 column dot matrix printer, plain paper, printer with full PET graphics. Oh, this printer, I missed it. It says electrostatic printer. Is that the type like the original Sinclair ones that burned the paper? And that was $550? What? And then to use one that didn't use the electrostatic but let you use a ribbon was $849, and that wasn't even with tractor feed. Tractor feed was an extra $100. Okay, and here's where we're getting kind of crazy. 2040, that's the dual disk drive we talked about earlier. $1,095. Now, it was an entire computer in there. There's a 6502 and RAM, and isn't that just shocking? Now, even the external cassette player, which of course you require when you buy those later 2001 ends, like the 16 and 32, that was $95. It's like $300 just to save some programs on a cassette. Here's a little blurb about the 2040 floppy drive. So it's an intelligent IEEE drive that is controlled by two 6500 microprocessors. That's right, I forgot I had two in there, not just one. which of course allowed it to do this. In addition, the system is capable of executing machine language programs to read directly from diskettes or transmitted from the PET. This feature is useful for executing complete diagnostic programs, recovering data, and custom operating systems. And these drives hooked up through the IEEE bus, basically, and it allows you to use one set of these disk drives, which are very expensive, right, among a bunch of Commodore PETs. So I think that was a typical configuration, at least in an education environment. But imagine if you were a home user and you had to spend that much on a disk drive. Well, would you look at this? An interesting display of graphics. Try running this one-line program entitled Burrow. And it has PETS key for up, down, left, right. And it uses a random 0.5 in here. And basically, it probably fills your screen up with these characters. I will have to try this. But is this similar to the one-line maze program that is so common on all the Commodores? Did it originate in one of these Commodore user group magazines? I'm going to have to try this out. And here's a list of authorized Commodore PET dealers. And it's listed by state. Oh, Alaska had none at the time. Of course, I live in Oregon, so I have to skip to Oregon, and there were only 2. Now, Oklahoma had none. One company was called Ancrona, 1125 Northeast 82nd Avenue. And there was another one in Salem, Computer Pathways Unlimited, 145 Alice Street South. So here's Volume 1, Issue 4 and 5. I don't think there's a copy of Volume 2 or 3. There's just lots of nice, useful tips and tricks and little programs and stuff you can do in this book. This is pretty cool, actually. I would have loved this if I had a PET back in the day and had gotten these newsletters. This little section here is kind of amusing. Protecting programs. For those who are concerned about unauthorized copying of your programs, there's some kind of a process here. According to Mr. Lindsay, you can load a protected program by typing load, enter. You will then be amazed to see that the program loads and immediately runs. If for some reason you manage to break out of the program, the stop key does not work. Your program will not list correctly and you will lose control of your PET and have to turn it off and on again. A save will not work, neither will the sys equivalent. Check it out, everyone. The June 15th, 1982 official Commodore price list. You'd be having to spend $299.95 for your VIC-20. 5K of RAM, includes RF modulator and TV switch box. The dataset recorder would cost you $75, and the VIC-1515 graphics printer dot matrix prints full character set and tractor feed $395. Boy, had things gotten cheaper, hadn't they, compared to that earlier 1979 price list, right? The VIC-1540 single disk drive, media compatible with Commodore 2031 and 4040s, $599. I mean, who really would use a floppy drive with their VIC-20, at least in 1982? I just can't imagine that. And the Commodore 64 had come out, $595. And here's the PET's 4016N. So they were up to the Model 40s at that point, and that was down to $995. So the N's were the graphic keyboard, and this one had the larger 12-inch screen, right? And the 4032, this is like my newer PETs that I have, $1,295. And then the business range, I think at this point, had really ended up at just the 8032, which has had the business keyboard, 80 columns mode, and that was 1,500 smackers. And here's the elusive 64K add-on for the 8032 that would expand it to 96K, and that was an extra $500, which is shockingly expensive because you could buy the entire Commodore 64 for $595, and they were trying to charge $500 for just 64K on an add-on card. And then here's the very hard to find Super PET, right? So it's the 8032, but it has the co-processor card, a 6809, total of 134K of RAM. It includes some extra languages like Waterloo Micro Basic, Waterloo Micro APL, Waterloo Micro Pascal, Fortran, and Waterloo 6809 assembly. $2,000. Now, of course, it really seems like this plus the 64K would be $2,000. If you were going to buy this, wouldn't you just buy the Super PET? That seems like a better deal. Now, here's a price to really blow your mind. 5 megabyte hard drive, $3,000. 7.5 megabytes, $3,500. What does that come out to? $10,000 or something like that? I'll put the conversion on the screen, but it's going to be mind-blowing for 7.5 megabytes. And then for letter quality daisy wheel printing, $2,250. 40 CPS. Daisy wheel printers were so slow. This is mind-blowingly expensive. I didn't realize the daisy wheels cost so much. We ended up with an Apple II computer that was used around 1984 or so, and it came with a daisy wheel printer. And I remember that thing. I don't know who made it, brother maybe, or someone, but it was so loud. I mean, it printed really nicely. It's like basically like a typewriter in a way. But $2,250 for a daisy wheel printer? I mean, this probably more than the hard drive prices. This printer thing is blowing my mind because it just feels like printers shouldn't be that expensive. Announced September 30 was the VIC-20, a new color machine aimed specifically at the education and home hobbyist market. The machine utilizes PET BASIC and ROM, making it a member of the PET family, ! And comes with a full-size keyboard, 5K of RAM, which can be expanded in stages up to 32K, color, sound, and high-resolution graphics. Wait, what? The VIC-20, please correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't have any graphics capabilities. You're using character set changes to make graphics using character sets. VIC-20 will provide high-quality color pictures with an ordinary color domestic television set and utilizes Commodore MOS Technology's latest video interface chip to drive the composite video output. VIC-20, which is designated to be a user-friendly computer, friendlier in price, friendlier in size, and friendly to use and enjoy. Ooh, that's so catchy. So here's the VIC-20. If anyone didn't know, the original VIC-20 keyboard had these larger letters on it, which are actually the same ones that were used on the PET. And then also I think they had the gold or silver labels as well. So this is sort of like a PET style keyboard. And then look at this crazy floppy drive, the 8061. I don't think I'm even familiar with this. And then this PET here, which had the larger size that the later PETs have, like the 40 and the 80 series. And it has 96K. Woo! Neat. And that is the end of all of this stuff that Bill sent me. So Bill, thank you very much for this amazing cornucopia of stuff. I know I've said that word a lot, but look at all these discs and all this cool old stuff for the PET. If anyone watching is very interested in anything specific in here, please hit me up. I'm more than willing to scan whatever is necessary here, even if it's stuff like this, and I'll put it up on a public location so you can access it. Well, that's going to be it for this mini mail call video. It was really not mini in any way. It was rather maxi. Anyways, there was a lot of cool stuff to look at, so I thought I'd take my time, and I actually cut out quite a bit of it. It could have been a lot longer. So I've successfully copied all the files off all these PET floppy disks, and I have them on an SD card, so I just need a place to upload them. So if you're aware of a good spot where I can upload those to share them with the community, please hit me up on email and let me know so I can get that done, and I'll put a link in the description once that's ready. So that's going to be it. If you liked this video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up, but if you didn't, you can hit that thumbs down button. Subscribe for more videos. There'll be lots more in the future. Of course, you can hit that bell icon if you want to be notified when I upload new videos, and put your comments and your questions down in the comment section below. And there we go. Stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.